Writing has crept slowly into and out of my life. Pure chaos to comics and plans. Such was the evolution of my literacy. Although my writing has grown since I first tried to glue a story together, it always felt stagnated, like a mental barrier that prevents a realization of my full potential, always becoming stuck. I'd say the official start to my creative writing endeavors came to fruition in second grade. I spent the entire year playing with the idea that my classmates had to fight off an evil robot invasion of our school. We would be trapped inside our elementary school and rely on each other to defeat the big bad leader who made the robots. The teachers I came to adore had to be rescued by the kids. At this point, I started to gain feelings of being stuck. To fix this, I added new plot points like original characters or superpowers, though this was by the end of the year when I had retired the story altogether to try and create another one for my third grade class. In retrospect, this was the beginning of becoming so obsessed with an idea that I wouldn't let it grow and just restart again. The next most potent years of writing wouldn't be in the classic pen and paper. During middle school, you could find me using a multimodal form of writing. At the time, I wouldn't realize that I was writing, but creating a dialogue and setting up a scene, even within an app, is the core of a story. I used pictures to form movement for overpowered princesses, vampires, another version of my friends fighting evil, and then several short stories. In sixth grade, I started with an older version of the app series called Gotcha Studio, where I mimicked what other youths were making in that day and age. Mary Sue's. Well, it was a very taboo thing at the time as 90s kids were exiting their rainbow self insert OC original character phase. My Mary Sue, an overpowered princess that came from an abusive family, didn't read like a Mary Sue to the sixth grade brain at the time. This story received a classic ending of evil stepsisters kidnapping our main lead. They were then punished by being locked up for eternity. Looking back at this time period, I can see the constant kidnapping plots that I would add into stories. I feel like this was my way of ending something, giving something a happy ending. But in reality, it would just start a line of questions, including how the characters would deal with the stress of the situation. Would they develop PTSD? Instead of questioning and pushing forward, I would just move on to the next narrative. The Vampire Sisters would be what I call my next masterpiece, about a month later. Though I had never read nor watched Twilight, I copied what the other kids on YouTube were doing, making huge families of vampires basically adopt another kid their age. Originally, this story was supposed to focus on the boy that was brought into that family. However, he became boring. I found it much more interesting to discover what one of the vampires, Arya, would be feeling about an invasion of their home and how they would navigate school. I learned that I preferred to focus on the feelings of the angstiest person in that sphere and jump around to where I feel the story fits best. I still notice the urge to repeat this habit today, especially during high school. It came about because of the Unwind Dystopia series by Neil Shusterman and The Heroes of Olympus by Rick Riordan. In both stories, their point of view switches, and I find myself trying to mimic it. I've never gotten to the point where the perspective switch is narratively relevant, but it made creating a story more reasonable. My favorite tale from this time period would have had to been my Fantasyland series beginning at the tail end of sixth grade. Once again, I had my friends face off against evil, except with a twist. I tried to add how each individual would have really reacted with the power given to them. I found that characters would go overboard and try to right the wrongs of their life, or push past them and move forward. This idea of my friends fighting off against some type of evil is an idea that I still revisit from time to time. Most recently, I made a couple of storyboards and characters based off of people from high school. However, this time they were allowed to grow beyond the few basic traits I stole. In the end, I started to get creeped out by myself. I figured that to make a proper story, one's characters needed to have inspirations from more than one friend or stereotype. You can't just steal your friend's image. Inspiration is super different from that. At the end of middle school, about 2020, I created a couple of videos with voice acting from my friends. The characters in the stories wouldn't be based off of the person, but felt more fantastic or gritty than I had allowed myself to explore. For example, I made a small story with COVID in mind and what would have happened if we had been stuck inside the school. I played with the emotion of the characters, but once again, the story was hard to move forward. This time it was due to the fact that my friends weren't giving me their voice lines when I had scheduled them to, so I got frustrated and threw the story aside. It didn't help that COVID was a hard time for everyone. Being stuck inside your own head, constantly thinking about what bad thing would happen next to this nerdy group of high schoolers that you made, wasn't a good mindset. Lastly, in high school, I spent less time creatively writing, but drawing. It was summertime when I would sit down and take the time to write. In the summer of ninth grade, I started a post apocalyptic tale. This time, I spent more time trying to storyboard than telling a story. Caught in a cycle of trying to plan every major plot point and character archetype that I had forgot to write. That I forgot to just write. It's a trap that I still fall into every once in a while, though not to the same degree. You would find not a story, but a bunch of character sheets as if I were playing Dungeons and Dragons all alone. Knowing what their favorite color was or who they wanted to be, although that did mean something, overall meant nothing. Trying to flesh out characters without giving them a story to back themselves out is a tragedy, empty without fault. In the end, I would only get as far as planning the setting in a bunker and where they would need to go on a world map, never so much as starting the story. During 10th grade, I focused more on a coffee shop story. I tried to make a comic out of it and only got so far as the second iteration. Once again, I fell into the trap of obsessing over the character's inner being. I focused on how their family was made up and what they looked like, when I really should have just written. Another comic in the same time period, where I failed around the first portion, was based on The Leapfrog by Hans Christian Andersen. At the time, I thought it would be easier to finish a story based on another. I wanted to modernize the tale and make it in comic form. It was a point in my life where I just wanted a finished product to show, something portfolio worthy. But I had gotten fed up with this writing too, mainly because it was hard to draw the panels that I never storyboarded for. This told me that in the future, if I were to do another comic, I need to actually write the story and then make it into a comic. Comics require plans. Lastly, I obsessed over another comic, this time based on bird people within a Native American lens. This story too would fail because I never started writing the actual story, but how the characters would pass by each other or the accident that would scar the male lead. This was helpful to learn their characterizations, but not placing them inside of a setting to learn and grow wasn't the best move. At the end of high school, 12th grade, I became obsessed with running a Dungeons and Dragons campaign. I only was able to gather one group together, but it fell through pretty quickly because it wasn't their type of game. It was too slow because I left it too open. I really only planned for a dungeon. I didn't know what they should do at a village. I needed to space out plans and learn to let things be loose. Through the two campaigns, I explored building landscapes instead of characters. I experimented with knowing very few things about the people who populated the world because it was for the players to discover through their actions. I let the town could speak for itself. With a single one I had made for the campaign that still got unplayed, but I still got stuck. No matter what I tried, I wasn't happy creating this type of story without anything to populate the world. No direction nor plan to follow. I needed something with a few bonds, but loose enough to go in any direction. I needed to make something for me, not something I thought another would like. This brings us to my most recent writing adventures from the summer. I've been trying to focus less and less on planning and just putting pen to paper and writing for writing's sake. This summer, I played with mimicking other stories again that I felt were easy and quick to start concepts. I didn't try to make anything too serious, content serious. So I made the weird wolf stories. And I mean weird wolf stories, except without the smut. If you know, you know. They had a built-in system of classes and a certain way that they act, which made it easy to just start. This meant all I needed to plan was the actual cast. In a moment of self-restraint, I didn't allow more than a whisper about their names to be mentioned in the text beyond the story. Nothing about their mannerisms could be written down. I only got a couple of chapters written, but I'm determined not to give in this time. I want a finished product, no matter how many years it takes me. To summarize, my literacy narrative has been full of starts, but never an end. It feels like I have nothing to show for the years I've spent writing, but looking back at every story has made me realize something. I like to write and keep on writing. No matter how many times I need to restart, one day I'll commit to an idea. I learned so much from how to start a story to planning to becoming inspired. Although I need reminding, writing is a process. No matter how much I get stuck, I need to move forward. I need to let something suck. This is why I hope that college, and more specifically English 101, will help me burst through this creative blockade. I want to stop getting stuck. Thank you for listening.